Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're going to be looking at anxiety.
Ooh, interesting.
Yeah, we got a ton of articles about this from you guys.
Seems to be a popular one.
It really does. So let's unpack it.
Yeah.
What is it really? How does it show up in our lives?
Yeah.
And most importantly, what can we do about it?
You know, it's funny because anxiety is often framed as like this purely negative thing,
Right.
but all these sources, they really highlight that it's actually a natural response,
Okay.
an essential one.
So it's not necessarily the enemy.
Right.
That's kind of a relief.
Yeah, exactly.
But where's the line?
Yeah, where's the line?
Between like normal anxiety
Yeah.
and when it becomes a problem.
Well, think of it this way. You've probably heard anxiety described as like this fight or flight response.
Right.
So imagine, our ancestors out on the savannah.
Okay, yeah.
They're constantly on alert for predators, right?
Yeah.
That spike of anxiety, that burst of energy, that's what helped them survive.
So little anxiety kept them from becoming lion lunch.
Exactly.
Makes sense.
And that same system is still with us today.
Okay.
It helps us, slam on the brakes if we're about to get into a car accident or study for that big exam.
Right.
But here's the tricky part. For a lot of people, that alarm system is kind of stuck in the on position. It's like a smoke detector that just keeps going off even when you're just making toast.
Right. Yeah.
And that's when anxiety stops being helpful and starts to really take over.
One of the sources used a great analogy. They said it's like having a car alarm.
Oh, yeah.
That's so sensitive that it goes off every time a bird lands on it,
Oh, that's a good one.
which is,
Yeah.
kind of what it feels like I'm seeing here too, that people with a physically active lifestyle have a 60% lower chance of developing anxiety symptoms.
Really?
That's huge.
Wow.
That's a pretty compelling reason to get moving.
It really is. And what's fascinating is that exercise doesn't just make us feel better physically, it actually changes our brain chemistry.
Okay.
There was this one study I was reading about where they found that just 30 minutes of brisk walking 3 times a week led to a significant decrease in self-reported anxiety levels.
So it's like hitting the gym
Yeah.
is actually hitting the reset button on your anxiety.
It really is.
Sign me up for that.
But it's not magic.
Right.
There's stuff going on in the brain.
Yeah. What's happening in the brain to make that happen?
It all comes down to these things called neurotransmitters.
Okay.
You know those chemical messengers that carry signals between brain cells?
Vaguely refresh my memory.
So when we exercise, our bodies actually increase the production of certain neurotransmitters like serotonin and GABA.
Okay.
And these play a key role in regulating our mood.
Hold on, Gabo. What is that exactly?
Yeah.
I've seen it in these articles, but it seems kind of technical.
Yeah, think of GABA as your brain's natural chill pill.
Okay.
It helps to calm things down when your thoughts are racing, like turning down the volume on all that mental noise.
And that makes a lot more sense.
Yeah.
So exercise is boosting these feel-good chemicals,
Right.
which helps to dial down the anxiety.
Yeah.
I could see why that's such a powerful tool.
It is. And it's not just, intense workouts either. Even gentler activities like yoga can have a positive impact on anxiety levels.
Okay.
There was another study where participants who practiced yoga regularly for just 8 weeks, they reported significant reductions in anxiety, stress, even depressive symptoms.
So you don't have to be a marathon runner to reap the benefits.
Exactly.
I like the sound of that.
It's accessible for everyone.
Pretty much, yeah.
Pretty much.
But I'm guessing there's more to this anxiety puzzle
Oh, for sure.
than just hitting the gym, right?
Yeah. It's like building a house exercise is a great foundation,
Okay.
but we need other elements to create a really solid structure.
Okay, so what else are we adding to this anxiety-busting blueprint?
Well, we were talking earlier about anxiety being like a car alarm going off all the time.
Right.
One of the biggest culprits in triggering that alarm is sleep deprivation.
That makes sense because I've noticed when I'm sleep deprived, even little things seem to set off my anxiety.
Yes.
It's like my fuse is much shorter.
Exactly. When we're sleep deprived, our brains are basically running on fumes.
Yeah.
And that makes us much more vulnerable to stress and anxiety.
Okay.
There's actually a study that found that people who consistently got less than 7 hours of sleep a night were significantly more likely to report feeling anxious and overwhelmed.
So we've got exercise and sleep
Yes.
as key players in managing anxiety.
Huge ones.
What else should we be paying attention to?
Another big one that comes up in a lot of these sources is diet.
You mean like what I eat
Yeah.
can actually affect how anxious I feel?
Absolutely. Think about it. Our brains need the right fuel to function optimally.
Okay.
If we're constantly bombarding them with processed foods, sugar, and caffeine, it's no wonder they start to misfire.
So it's not just about calories.
Right.
It's about nourishing our brains
Yes.
with the nutrients they need to stay balanced.
Exactly.
I've heard people talk about the gut-brain connection too.
Oh, interesting.
Is there any truth to that?
There's actually a ton of research emerging right now on what's called the gut microbiome,
Okay.
which is basically the community of trillions of bacteria
Six.
that live in our digestive tracts.
That's more than stars in the Milky Way.
It is, and what's fascinating is that these tiny organisms actually play a role in our mental health.
Really?
Studies have shown that an imbalance in the gut microbiome can contribute to a range of mental health issues, including anxiety and depression.
So if we want to calm our minds, we need to take care of our guts too.
Makes sense, right?
It makes sense, but what does that actually look like?
Well, one of the best things we can do is to eat a diverse and balanced diet.
Okay.
That includes plenty of fiber-rich fruits, vegetables, and whole grains.
Okay.
Fermented foods like yogurt and sauerkraut can also be beneficial because they introduce good bacteria into the gut.
Got it. And I'm guessing those sugary drinks
Yeah.
and processed snacks
Yeah, not so much.
are a big no-no.
You got it. Those types of foods can actually disrupt the balance of bacteria in our gut, which leads to inflammation and potentially contributes to anxiety.
So we're building this solid foundation with exercise, sleep, and diet.
Yeah.
But what about those moments when anxiety hits us out of the blue?
Yeah.
Are there any quick fixes
Yes.
we can use in those situations?
Absolutely. These sources highlight some really cool techniques that can help to calm the storm in the moment.
Okay.
Things like mindfulness and deep breathing exercises.
Okay, I've heard of those. But to be honest, I've always been a little skeptical.
Really?
It just seems too simple.
Mm.
How can something like breathing actually make a difference?
Well, think about it this way. Remember how we talked about anxiety triggering that fight or flight response?
Yeah.
When that happens, our bodies go into overdrive, right? Our heart's racing, our breathing quickens, our muscles tense. Deep breathing exercises are like hitting the brakes on that runaway train.
So it's like sending a signal to our bodies that it's okay to relax.
Exactly. And by slowing down our breathing, we're actually calming down our nervous system.
Okay.
One study found that people who practice deep breathing exercises for just 10 minutes a day experience significant reductions in anxiety and stress levels.
Wow. 10 minutes. I could definitely fit that in.
Right.
What about mindfulness?
Yeah.
I've heard that word thrown around a lot, but I'm not really sure what it means in practice.
Mindfulness is a simple but powerful concept. It's about paying attention to the present moment without judgment. So instead of getting caught up in worries about the future or dwelling on the past, you're just focusing on what's happening right now.
I can see how that could be helpful for anxiety because my worries tend to be all over the place.
Yeah.
From what I said in that meeting 3 weeks ago to what might happen on my vacation next month.
Exactly. And mindfulness helps to anchor us in the present moment, which can feel much calmer and more manageable than those swirling thoughts about the past or future.
I like that. Do you have any tips for incorporating mindfulness into daily life? It seems like one of those things that's easier said than done.
It definitely takes practice, but even small moments of mindfulness can make a big difference.
Okay.
So you can try focusing on your breath for a few minutes, paying attention to the sensations of your body, or simply noticing the sights and sounds around you.
One of the sources mentioned a technique called the 5-4-3-2-1 grounding technique.
Oh, yeah.
Have you heard of that?
Yes. That's a great way to bring yourself back to the present moment when you're feeling anxious.
Tell me more. How does it work?
Basically, you find a quiet spot, and then you take a few deep breaths to kind of settle in. Then you start by noticing 5 things you can see around you.
Okay.
Then 4 things you feel, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, and finally 1 thing you can taste.
It's like a mental checklist for your senses.
Exactly.
I can see how that would help shift your focus away from anxious thoughts and ground you in the here and now.
Exactly. It's a simple but effective way to interrupt that spiral of worry and bring yourself back to a state of calm.
So we've got exercise, sleep, diet, deep breathing, and mindfulness.
Yeah.
That's a pretty solid toolkit for managing anxiety.
It's a great start.
But I'm guessing it's not always that simple.
Right. You're right. Sometimes, despite our best efforts, anxiety can feel really overwhelming and debilitating.
Right.
And in those cases, it's important to remember that seeking professional help is not a sign of weakness.
Okay.
It's actually a sign of strength.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So what are some signs that it might be time to reach out for professional support?
Well, if you're finding that anxiety is constantly interfering with your daily life, your relationships, your work, that's a big red flag.
So it's not just about having occasional worries. It's when those worries start to take over
Right.
and prevent you from living your life to the fullest.
Exactly. Another sign is if you're experiencing panic attacks,
Mm.
which are these sudden episodes of intense fear that can be incredibly debilitating.
Those sound terrifying. What exactly happens during a panic attack?
They can vary from person to person, but common symptoms include a racing heart difficulty, breathing, dizziness, sweating, even a sense of impending doom.
That sounds awful.
Yeah,
I can see why that would be a sign that you need professional help.
absolutely, and there are many effective treatment options available,
Okay.
such as therapy and medication.
One article mentioned finding a therapist who specializes in anxiety as a key to achieving a cure.
Interesting.
That seems pretty hopeful, right?
It is, but I have to admit the idea of therapy can be a little intimidating.
Yeah.
I've never been to a therapist before,
Right?
and I'm not really sure what to expect.
That's totally understandable.
Yeah.
It's a big step.
It is.
And it's important to find a therapist that you feel comfortable with.
Right.
But remember, therapists are trained to help people navigate difficult emotions and develop coping mechanisms.
They are.
Think of them as guides on your journey toward mental well-being.
I like that.
So it's not about fixing something that's wrong with you. It's about learning new skills and strategies to manage anxiety
Yeah.
and live a more fulfilling life.
Exactly. And there are many different types of therapy available, so you can find an approach that really resonates with you.
I see that cognitive behavioral therapy
CBT.
is mentioned quite a bit in these sources.
Yes, very popular.
Could you explain a bit about that?
Sure.
I've heard the term, but I'm not really sure what it entails.
CBT is one of the most widely researched and effective therapies for anxiety.
Okay.
It's based on the idea that our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors are all interconnected.
Okay, so how does that play out in therapy?
Well, in CBT, you work with a therapist to identify and challenge negative thought patterns that are contributing to your anxiety.
Okay.
You learn to replace those unhelpful thoughts with more positive and realistic ones, which can have a profound impact on your mood and behavior.
So it's like retraining your brain
Yes.
to think about things in a more helpful way.
Exactly. And CBT also involves gradually exposing yourself to situations that trigger your anxiety.
Yeah.
In a safe and controlled environment.
Wait, so you actually face your fears?
You do.
That sounds kind of scary.
It can be challenging, but it's done gradually and with the support of a therapist.
Okay.
The idea is that by repeatedly confronting those fears, you can reduce their power over you.
So it's like taking small steps to build up your confidence and resilience.
Exactly.
I can see how that would be empowering.
It is, and for many people, CBT can be a game changer in terms of managing anxiety and living a more fulfilling life.
That's amazing. I'm starting to see anxiety in a whole new light. It's not just this scary monster that we have to run from.
Right.
It's something we can understand,
Yeah,
manage, and even overcome.
exactly. It's about empowering yourself to take control,
Right.
rather than letting anxiety control you.
And remember, you don't have to do this alone.
You don't.
Well, I'm definitely feeling more hopeful and less overwhelmed.
But
But before we move on, is there anything else we should cover about the basics of anxiety?
let me think. We've covered anxiety as a natural response, the impact of lifestyle factors, and the importance of seeking professional help when needed.
Right.
I think we've laid a good foundation.
Perfect.
Uh-huh.
So now that we understand what we're dealing with, let's dive into your arsenal of tools for managing anxiety in the moment.
Okay, let's do it.
Get ready, because this is where it gets really interesting.
I'm excited. All right, so you're feeling that familiar tightness in your chest, your thoughts are swirling, and you just want to hit the pause button on all the anxiety.
Yeah. What do you do?
Well, knowing my luck, I'd probably reach for another cup of coffee.
Right.
But I'm guessing that's not what these articles recommend.
Probably not, but what is it?
Well, think of these techniques as like a mental first aid kit for those moments when anxiety starts to spiral.
I love that analogy.
Yeah.
So what's the first tool we're reaching for in our anxiety first aid kit?
One of the simplest yet most effective techniques is to just do a reality check.
We like looking in the mirror?
Not quite. It's about taking a step back and actually challenging those anxious thoughts.
Okay.
Ask yourself, is there a real and present danger right now, or am I simply worrying about something that might happen in the future?
It's like fact-checking your own anxieties.
Exactly.
I can see how that could be helpful because sometimes I get so caught up in my worries that I forget to consider whether they're actually grounded in reality.
Exactly. Another helpful tool is to just remind yourself that you're safe.
Okay.
Remember, anxiety often triggers that fight or flight response,
Right.
even when there's no real threat.
Yeah.
So take a moment to look around, reassure yourself that you're in a safe environment.
So it's like hitting the pause button on that primal fear response and reminding yourself that you're okay in this moment. I also see just breathe highlighted in a few articles.
Right, yeah.
We talked about deep breathing earlier.
Yeah.
But is there something specific about how we should breathe when anxiety hits?
You're right, we've touched on breathing, but it's so crucial. It's worth revisiting. One source suggests what they call the 4-7-8 technique.
Sounds intriguing.
Oh,
Break that down for me.
It's really simple. You inhale quietly through your nose for a count of 4, hold your breath for a count of 7, and then exhale completely through your mouth for a count of 8.
I've tried something like that before, and it really does seem to help slow down my racing heart.
Yeah.
It's like a mini meditation you can do anywhere.
Exactly. And if you find yourself, kind of getting carried away by worries, just bring your attention back to your breath. It's like an anchor that can help you stay grounded in the present moment.
Okay, so we've got reality checks, safety reminders, and breathing exercises. What else can we do when those anxious thoughts start to spiral?
Another technique that comes up a lot in these sources is redirecting your nervous energy.
Oh, yeah. I've noticed that when I'm anxious, I have all this energy that I don't know what to do with.
Yeah.
It's like my body's ready to run a marathon,
Right.
but my mind is telling me to stay put.
Exactly. So instead of letting that energy build up and fuel your anxiety, find a healthy outlet for it. Go for a walk, do some cleaning dance to your favorite music, anything that helps you to kind of shift your focus and release that pent-up energy.
I love that it's like turning anxiety into action.
Yeah.
Another strategy I see mentioned is changing your position.
Oh, interesting.
I'm not sure I understand that one. What does posture have to do with anxiety?
It's actually pretty fascinating. It's based on the idea that our physical state can actually influence our mental state.
Okay.
So if you're hunched over tense and holding your breath, you're kind of reinforcing those feelings of anxiety.
So if I'm feeling anxious, I should strike a power pose.
Not quite a power pose, but the principle is similar. The key is to do the opposite of whatever your body is doing when you're anxious. So if you're curled up in a ball, try stretching out your limbs. If you're clenching your fists, try opening your hands and wiggling your fingers.
It's like tricking your brain into a different state of mind.
Exactly.
And I can see how that could be helpful because when I'm anxious, I tend to hold a lot of tension in my body. Speaking of tension, one source talked about the benefits of progressive muscle relaxation.
Oh, yes.
What is that exactly? I think I've heard of it, but I'm not really sure how it works.
It's a technique where you systematically tense and relax different muscle groups in your body, starting with your toes and working your way up to your head.
Okay.
It's a great way to release physical tension, which often goes hand in hand with anxiety.
Okay, so how does that actually work?
So you find a comfortable position, either lying down or sitting in a chair, and then you focus on one muscle group at a time.
Okay.
For example, you might start by tensing the muscles in your toes as tightly as you can for 5 seconds.
Okay.
Then release the tension and notice the feeling of relaxation.
I can already feel my toes relaxing. What's next?
Then you move on to the next muscle group, like your calves,
Okay.
and repeat the process. You continue this way, gradually working your way up your body, tensing and releasing each muscle group along the way.
So it's like a full body scan of tension and release. Sounds incredibly soothing.
Yeah.
The articles also mentioned putting your anxiety on a schedule.
Oh.
That sounds a bit odd. How do you schedule worry?
I know it sounds counterintuitive, right? But it's actually a really helpful technique for those who find themselves constantly worrying throughout the day.
Okay.
The idea is to designate a specific time each day, like 15 minutes in the afternoon, as your worry time.
So instead of trying to suppress those anxious thoughts all day long, you're giving them a designated space to come out and play.
Exactly. And if those thoughts pop up outside of your designated worry time, you just gently acknowledge them and tell yourself, okay, I'll address you later during my worry time, but for now I'm focusing on other things.
It's like training your brain to contain those worries to a specific time and place.
Right.
I can see how that could be freeing.
It can be, and for those who struggle with anxiety at night, one source suggested that if you're lying in bed worrying for more than 5 minutes, you should get up.
Oh, I definitely need to try that one. I've lost count of how many nights I've spent tossing and turning,
Yeah.
replaying conversations in my head and worrying about things I have no control over.
It's a common problem. The idea is that if you stay in bed worrying your brain, you're training your brain to associate your bed with anxiety rather than sleep.
So by getting out of bed and doing something relaxing or distracting until you feel tired,
Right.
you're reestablishing that connection between bed and sleep. That makes a lot of sense. I also see a lot of articles mentioning the importance of social support for managing anxiety.
That's such a crucial point. We're social creatures by nature,
Right.
and having strong social connections can be a powerful buffer against stress and anxiety.
It's like having a built-in support system to help you navigate life's challenges.
Exactly.
But what if you're not the type of person who finds it easy to open up to others?
It's understandable to feel hesitant about sharing your anxieties, especially if you're worried about being judged or dismissed. But remember, true friends and loved ones want to support you,
Right.
even if they don't always know the right words to say.
Sometimes just having someone to listen without judgment can make all the difference.
It can.
And if you're not comfortable talking to someone, there are other options like support groups or online forums where you can connect with others who understand what you're going through.
Exactly. And remember, seeking professional help is also a form of social support.
Right.
Therapists are trained listeners who can provide a safe and confidential space to explore your anxieties and develop coping strategies.
So whether it's friends, family support groups, or therapists, having a network of support can make a world of difference when it comes to managing anxiety.
It's like having a team of cheerleaders in your corner, reminding you that you're not alone and that you have the strength to overcome whatever challenges you face.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. Reality checks, breathing exercises, physical movement, progressive muscle relaxation, scheduling, worry time, social support. It's a pretty impressive arsenal.
It is, and remember, these are just a few of the many tools and techniques available. It's about finding what works best for you and creating your own personalized anxiety toolkit.
What's great about these techniques is that they're all relatively simple and accessible.
Yes.
You don't need any special equipment or training to try them out.
Right.
It's just about being mindful of your thoughts, feelings, and behaviors and finding healthy ways to manage them.
Exactly. And remember, it's an ongoing process.
Right.
There will be days when you feel like you have it all under control and other days when anxiety feels overwhelming.
Right.
That's okay. The key is to be patient with yourself, keep practicing these techniques, and reach out for support when you need it.
This reminds me of something else I read in these articles, something called acceptance. Could you talk more about that?
Absolutely. Acceptance is a really powerful tool for managing anxiety, and it's something that often comes up in mindfulness practices.
But isn't accepting your anxiety the same as giving up?
That's a common misconception. Accepting your anxiety doesn't mean that you like it or that you're resigning yourself to a life of worry. It simply means acknowledging that anxiety is present
Right.
without judgment or resistance.
So instead of fighting against it, you're allowing it to be there without letting it take over.
Exactly. When we resist our anxiety, we often end up making it worse.
Okay.
It's like trying to push a beach ball underwater.
Right.
The harder you push, the harder it pushes back.
Okay, I'm starting to get it. So how do you actually practice acceptance when you're feeling anxious?
One way is to simply notice your anxiety without labeling it as good or bad.
Okay.
Just observe the physical sensations, the thoughts, and the emotions that are present without trying to change them.
It's like being a curious observer of your own experience.
Exactly. You can also try talking to your anxiety as if it were a separate part of you.
Okay.
You might say something like, okay, anxiety, I hear you. I know you're trying to protect me, but I'm safe right now. You can relax.
It's almost like befriending your anxiety
Yeah.
rather than battling against it.
Exactly. And by doing so, you might find that it loses some of its power over you.
I love that it's a much more compassionate and empowering approach than just trying to white-knuckle your way through those anxious moments.
It is. And remember, acceptance is a skill that takes practice.
Right.
You might not get it right away, and that's okay.
Okay.
The more you practice, the easier it will become.
This all makes so much sense. It's like you're giving us permission to be human,
Right.
to experience anxiety without shame or judgment, and to find healthy ways to manage it.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that anxiety is a part of life, but it doesn't have to define us.
Well said. And I think that's a great note to transition into the next part of our discussion. We've covered a lot of ground on managing anxiety in the moment, but what about the bigger picture?
Yeah.
What if those anxieties are rooted in deeper issues
Yeah.
that require professional help?
That's an excellent question.
Yeah.
Let's delve into the world of professional support
Okay.
and explore how therapy can provide lasting relief from anxiety.
So we've got all these amazing tools for managing anxiety in the moment. But what if those anxious feelings keep coming back?
Yeah.
Like, what if there's something deeper going on that needs more than just a quick fix?
That's a great question, and it's where professional help can really make a difference. You see, sometimes anxiety is like an iceberg.
Okay.
What we see on the surface, those anxious thoughts and feelings, are just the tip underneath. There might be deeper issues, past experiences, or thought patterns that are fueling those anxieties.
So it's like those in-the-moment techniques are great for managing the symptoms,
Right.
but therapy helps you address the root cause of the anxiety.
Think of it like this. If you have a leaky faucet, You can keep mopping up the floor,
Okay.
but until you fix the leak itself, the problem's going to keep coming back.
That's such a great analogy.
Therapy helps you identify and repair those leaks in your emotional plumbing.
It makes a lot of sense, but I think a lot of people, myself included, have this idea that therapy is only for people with serious mental health issues.
I hear you. That's a common misconception. Therapy can be beneficial for anyone who's struggling with difficult emotions, whether it's anxiety, stress, relationship issues, or just feeling stuck in a rut.
So it's not about being broken or needing to be fixed.
Right.
It's more like a tune-up for your mental well-being.
Exactly. And one of the most amazing things about therapy is that it can be incredibly empowering. You learn to understand your own thoughts and feelings, you develop healthy coping mechanisms, and you build resilience to life's challenges.
I see here that one source boldly states that anxiety is not a lifelong condition
Hmm.
and can actually be cured. That sounds pretty incredible. Is that really possible?
It absolutely is. It's not about erasing anxiety completely, as we've talked about. Some anxiety is normal and even helpful, but it's about learning to manage it effectively and prevent it from controlling your life. And finding a therapist who specializes in anxiety can significantly increase your chances of achieving a lasting cure.
That makes sense. It's like going to a specialist for any other health concern.
Right.
You want someone who has expertise in that particular area.
Precisely, an anxiety specialist can help you to uncover the root causes of your anxiety, whether it's related to past experiences, trauma, or learned behaviors, and then work with you to develop strategies to address those issues. They can also teach you specific techniques like cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, which we talked about earlier, to challenge negative thought patterns and develop healthier coping mechanisms.
Okay, so it's a personalized approach tailored to your unique needs and experiences.
Yeah.
But what if you're not sure where to start looking for a therapist?
There are a lot of resources available to help you find the right therapist. You can ask your doctor for a referral, you can check with your insurance provider, or you can search online directories like Psychology Today, and don't be afraid to shop around. It's important to find someone you feel comfortable with and who you trust.
It's like finding the right fitness coach.
Yeah.
You want someone who understands your goals, motivates you, and helps you reach your full potential.
Exactly. And remember, therapy is an investment in your mental well-being. It might take time and effort to find the right therapist and to work through those deeper issues, but the rewards can be life-changing.
Well, I'm definitely feeling more optimistic about the possibility of overcoming anxiety,
Yeah.
both in the moment and in the long run. We've covered so much ground in this deep dive. Is there anything else we should touch on before we wrap things up?
You know, there's one more point I think is worth highlighting.
Okay.
It's something that came up repeatedly in these sources, and it's the idea of self-compassion.
Self-compassion. What does that have to do with anxiety?
It has everything to do with it. You see, a lot of people who struggle with anxiety are incredibly hard on themselves. They criticize themselves for feeling anxious. They blame themselves for not being able to snap out of it, and they compare themselves to others who seem to have it all together.
Oh my gosh, that's totally me.
Yeah.
I'm always beating myself up for feeling anxious, and it just makes me feel worse.
Yeah. It's a vicious cycle, but self-compassion is the antidote. It's about treating yourself with the same kindness, understanding, and support that you would offer to a close friend.
So it's like being your own best friend.
Exactly. And it's so important because when we're struggling with anxiety, we need that inner support more than ever.
I love that it's a much gentler and more loving approach than the constant self-criticism I usually subject myself to.
I agree.
But how do you actually practice self-compassion?
Well, start by noticing when you're being hard on yourself. Pay attention to your self-talk and challenge those negative thoughts. Instead of saying, I'm such a mess, I can't believe I'm feeling anxious again. Try saying, it's okay to feel anxious. Everyone experiences anxiety. Sometimes I'm doing the best I can.
It's like shifting from a critic to a cheerleader in your own head.
Exactly. And remember, self-compassion isn't about being perfect or pretending that everything is okay. It's about acknowledging your struggles, offering yourself kindness and support, and recognizing that you're worthy of love and acceptance even when you're feeling anxious.
I'm really struck by this idea of self-compassion. It's like a missing piece of the puzzle for managing anxiety.
It really is, and I think it's a beautiful note to end our deep dive on.
I agree. So to recap for our listeners, anxiety is a natural human experience, but it doesn't have to rule your life. There are so many tools and techniques available to help you manage those anxious feelings, both in the moment and in the long run. Whether it's exercise, deep breathing, mindfulness, or seeking professional support, there's a path to healing and well-being.
And remember, you don't have to go through this alone. Reach out to trusted friends, family members, or mental health professionals for support and guidance. You are stronger than you think, and you deserve to live a life that is free from the grip of anxiety.
This deep dive has given you a great starting point. But remember, it's your journey. What resonates with you most? What are you curious to explore further? Take this information and make it your own.
And above all, be kind to yourself. You're doing the best you can.
That's what makes a deep dive truly worthwhile. Until next time, dear listener.